Oh, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Outside the Shop with me, your host, Daryl D. Lane. As always, first of all, just want to say, if you haven't checked out the podcast I did with Kenny Sim recently, Scotty asked for some sports. You can check that out on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. As always, this is the place where I get to talk about everything that I do not get a chance to talk about on my regular podcast. So, first of all, what we have for today. The Lakers, they lose. Everybody's terrified. Like, what happened? Well, folks, I'm just going to say, this loss means nothing. I'm looking at this right now. LeBron James, only 28 minutes? That really never happens with LeBron. And he wasn't in foul trouble either. They just didn't play him. They didn't care. Anthony Davis didn't play a whole lot. Kawhi Leonard played 34. Paul George played 36. This was a case of one team going balls to the walls trying to win a game, and the other team, knowing that they're the champions, having a little bluster, having a little bit of machismo, kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, we'll be here in June when the playoff games start. You can have the regular season. So next up, the other game that happened yesterday, the Brooklyn Nets and the Golden State Warriors. Kevin Durant, 22 points. Kyrie Irving, 26 points. Kevin Durant was 7 of 16, had 5 rebounds, 3 steals. Kyrie Irving was 10 of 16, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Pretty even, pretty balanced. Really excited to see the Brooklyn Nets. And Kevin Durant is back. He looked really good. Even though he only scored 22 points, he looked like he was moving, he was cutting, he was doing all the right things, and he looked legit. So I think that is really good news for the Nets. So now on the NBA front, where I want to go is this. So tonight, the Thunder and the Rockets are supposed to play. That game has been canceled due to COVID-19 issues. James Harden got fined $50,000 for allegedly being in a strip club, even though he says it was just to support his homegirl that was doing some things, like it was like a party. I guess that's the best way to put it. And it was not a strip club, though apparently there's some leaks of video that it was a strip club. But nonetheless, $50,000 is a lot of money to get fined for. But here's what I do want to ask everybody this, and you can put this in the mentions. Do you think, because everybody knows James Harden's a big strip club guy, do you think James Harden spends $50,000 when he goes to strip clubs normally? Because then him getting fined $50,000 for going to a strip club, if that is indeed what he did and he's just lying, that's nothing, right? Because he usually just does that anyway. So it's just on par for the course for James Harden. But nonetheless, this is not good. So now, college football. Brian Herschline, former Boise State head coach, has just been hired by the Auburn Tigers to replace Gus Malzahn. Now, I'm looking at this right now. 69-19 was his record. Now, that's very good. Boise State is historically one of the best group of 5 schools out there. But here's what I'm saying. This guy, he's not Gus Malzahn. You hired down. Here's what I always say. If you're going to fire a coach, fire him for someone better. Do not fire him for someone worse. You let go one of the top 10 coaches in the country, a guy that got your team to a national championship game, a guy that has beaten Alabama, and I'm not sure if Brian Hartline is going to do that. I'm not sure if he's going to do that. They're probably going to be a little worse with him. So to me, it doesn't make any sense, and I have to wonder why this happened and how it happened. Not a favor of the move because I don't think he's a good coach. Just for a job like Auburn, they can do better. They for sure can do better. Now, Joe Judge, head coach of the New York Football Giants. So the Giants can't focus on Christmas because they're focusing on the Ravens. Now, this is really interesting, and here's my broader point to this. Think about this with Joe Judge and the whole NFC East. This is the one good thing that has come out of the fact that one of these bad teams is going to make the playoffs. That they're all still competing, right? That they're all still competing. Because, for example, if this was just the top 7 records, the Giants would be out. And you could say, focus on Christmas. We don't need to beat the Ravens. It doesn't matter. But because that's not the case, they all still, the Eagles are still in it. The Washington football team is still in it. The Giants are still in it. All these teams are still in it. So, given the fact they're still in, we don't have to see tanking and stuff like that. So I think that is the one good thing about this, that there's always a division winner for the NFL and they get an automatic berth. It eliminates, in scenarios like this, odd year scenarios where there's a really awful division, like this happened to the NFC West about a decade ago when the Seattle Seahawks were 7-9 and made the playoffs. It still incentivizes you to win games because you have something to play for. You can still make the playoffs. So I think that caveat, winning the division, you're in, you get a home playoff game in normal years with your fans, I think that is good and smart by the NFL. So, team president Rich McKay says Falcons will allow their next GM to part ways with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones if it is equitable and makes sense. So here's what I was thinking. Here's some teams that I could see Matt Ryan going to that would make sense. The New England Patriots, right? Cam Newton was awful this year. There's the Steelers. Big Ben hasn't been playing well. There's the Colts. I could see maybe Frank Reich saying, let's get rid of Phillip Rivers. There's the Raiders. We know John Gruden isn't that high on Derek Carr. There's the Washington football team. Dwayne Haskins, Alex Smith. That little combination is not Matt Ryan. And there's the San Francisco 49ers, who, let's remember, Kyle Shanahan was Matt Ryan's offensive coordinator in Atlanta. I think all 6 of these teams could use Matt Ryan. Let's remember, Matt Ryan's a former league MVP. He's still in the 10 to 15 range of NFL quarterbacks. He's still a really good quarterback and can throw for a lot of yards, can make all the right decisions. So I think one of these teams that could potentially be looking for a veteran presence to steady the boat, because he's like 37, 38, could definitely use Matt Ryan for the next couple of years. And also the Bears and Vikings, I think, could use him too. So, here are teams for Julio. I'm going to say the Buffalo Bills, right? Because I think the Bills could, hey, why not give Josh Allen? Hey, Josh, you have Stephon Diggs. Why not give you Julio too? That'd be awesome. But in more realistic scenarios, I have Packers, Devontae Adams, Julio Jones with Aaron Rodgers. That's something interesting. The Miami Dolphins, their wide receiver situation isn't great. I think that would be a great thing for Tua to have a Julio Jones. There's the Colts. The Colts don't really have a true elite number 1 wide receiver. There's the 49ers. The 49ers kind of do it more with scheme. But again, Kyle Shanahan. No Julio Jones was an offensive coordinator in Atlanta. Maybe Kyle Shanahan likes that possibility. The Chargers. Imagine pairing Julio Jones and Keenan Allen together. That'd be a really good combination. And the Eagles don't really have a number 1 receiving option either. And that's all we have for this edition of Outside the Shop. Like I said, everybody, if you want to check out my regular sports podcast, you can check it out on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all your podcasting platforms. We're going to be having some really good content. We're going to be having Ben Karen host the Sports Coffee podcast as we preview week 16 now, right? It's time's flown by. Week 16 of the NFL season. So definitely stay on the lookout for that. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. God bless.